So I'm looking at Hanukkah right now. A lot of the Watchman community is looking at Hanukkah and trying to see if there are any rapture connections. And so I'm looking also in my own way. I'm looking at like number connections and word study connections. I didn't actually know that much about Hanukkah, but I learned a lot in the last few days. Hanukkah, the word means dedication because it's about dedicating the temple. And the root Hebrew word that it's based on is Chanuk, which is the same word as Enoch, because Enoch in Hebrew is Hanuk, and his name means dedicated one. And so right there already you've got a rapture connection, because Enoch was the first man who was raptured, and his name is the root word for the name of this feast. Let's see. Yeah, so it's also called the Festival of Lights. I'm not sure why they call it the Festival of Lights. Let's look it up. Okay, I guess it's about lighting the menorah for 8 nights or something. Lighting the menorah commemorates this miracle, represents the idea that light will always defeat darkness. Okay, so that's what the Jews say. And people also call it the Festival of Lights because it's believed that Hanukkah was when Jesus Christ was conceived. And there's the whole thing about a flash of light at a human conception that people have observed under the microscope. So that's like, and also that's like when light entered the world. Is when Jesus Christ was conceived. That's when light entered the world. So Hanukkah has that connection too. And concerning Hanukkah's origins, so the Jewish tradition is that that Hanukkah is 8 days because it says here that they had enough oil for only one of the candles or the lamps or whatever, but it miraculously lasted 8 nights. So that's why they celebrated for 8 days and nights. But what I learned recently, I think it was from CoolCat7729's channel, was that that's just a tradition, and the true reason is found in the Book of Maccabees. And what it says is that because Antiochus Epiphanes had defiled the temple, they weren't able to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles in the correct month, and they had to wait a month. So they ended up celebrating the Feast of Tabernacles 1 month late, and that's what became Hanukkah. And we know that Feast of Tabernacles is an 8-day feast celebration, because you've got the 7 days of Sukkot, and then that last eighth day, which is like the great last day, right, or the great 8th day of Hanukkah, or of Tabernacles rather. So celebrating that 1 month later, that's why it's an 8-day festival. Hanukkah is an 8-day festival, right? Because it's basically just the 8-day Sukkot celebrated at a different time. And so that's the real reason. So and then Jewish tradition has had its own meaning, but it's not the real origin of the holiday. So so there's that. And we know that the Feast of Tabernacles has to do with dedicating the temple, because in 1 Kings 8, when Solomon is dedicating the first temple, he's doing it at the Feast of Tabernacles. So that's sort of the background on Hanukkah. And people in the Watchman community have been looking at some scripture in relation to Hanukkah. So I think they're looking at John 10. Yeah, John 10. Because the setting is Hanukkah. That's why. So because it says in John 10:22, and it was at Jerusalem, the feast of the dedication, and it was winter. And the Feast of the Dedication is just another name for Hanukkah. Let's see here. So the thing about John 10 is it has a lot of the elements of Revelation 4:1, which is a rapture verse. So if you go to Revelation 4:1, After this I looked, and behold, a door was opened in heaven, and the first voice which I heard was as it were of a trumpet talking with me, which said, Come up hither, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter. So you've got these elements. You've got a door, and then you've got hearing a voice, and then you've got him being raptured up to the throne room, right? And then if you go to go back to John chapter 10, in verse 9, Jesus says famously, I am the door. So you got your door there. And then in verses 28, he says, in verse 16, he says, he's talking about these other sheep that he has, and that they shall hear his voice, right? They shall hear my voice. So there you go. Hearing, you have got the hearing a voice element. That was from Revelation 4:1. And in John 10 verses 28, you've got Jesus talking about giving them eternal life, and they shall never perish, neither shall any man pluck them out of my hand. And pluck is Strong's Greek 726, which is harpazo. So there's your harpazo, just like in Revelation 4:1, where John was harpazo to the throne room. And then also in John 10:29, he talks about his Father, nobody being able to pluck those that were given to him out of his Father's hand, right? And it's again, that's the same word, Strong's Greek 726. And then to top it off, you've got in verses 39 and 40 how when he's done speaking with the Pharisees, they sought to capture him, but he escaped out of their hand and went away again beyond the Jordan. And that sounds like a rapture scenario, because it's like how we escape out of the snare in the book of Luke. And then it says, went away again beyond the Jordan. And the Jordan is typologically represents, crossing into heaven. So he escapes out of their hand like a rapture the bird out of the snare, and then goes beyond the Jordan, goes to heaven. Okay. So, yeah, I was looking at this. So how is this connecting to our current time? Well, first of all, numerically, let's see, John is like the fourth book of the New Testament, right? And then it's the 10th chapter. And so in numerics, you drop the 1, so it's really just 4:1, right? John is the fourth book, and then that's, the 10 converts to the 1, and that's just like Revelation 4:1. And then John is the 43rd book in the Bible, right? 43rd book. And, 43 is equal to 20 plus 23, right? So you've got your 2023. And so so we're talking about hearing this voice, and so that word in the Strong's, what was that, verse 16? They shall hear my voice. That's Strong's Greek 191. Okay. So that's that word is akuo. That's where we get our word acoustic from. That's hearing. Okay. And that's Strong's Greek 191, right? And 191 is the 43rd prime number. Let's see. So right after John 10, so right after Jesus talks to the Pharisees and then escapes from them, he goes to Bethany, okay, and he raises Lazarus from the dead. So in John chapter 11, and the verse where he raises him from the dead happens to be verse 43, which I thought was striking. So again, you've got that 43 reference. And when he thus had spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And let's see, what else with the 43? It's 43, the 43rd book of the Bible. Yeah, there's also a connection with Zerubbabel, which I'll get to later. But and Zerubbabel, his name in Hebrew has an ordinal gematria value of 43. So it's another hint. And I guess I'll just have to come back to that. So, yeah, so that's the connection with John 10, right? It's really obviously a reference to Hanukkah, the Feast of the Dedication, and a reference to Revelation 4:1. And you've got some numerical connections going on there, little hints like with the 43. The other thing that people were looking at lately is, okay, so they're looking at Haggai and Zechariah. So we'll look at Haggai. They're looking at Haggai 2. Okay, so Haggai 2 is all about, I guess he's talking to Zerubbabel, and it's talking about the temple. And mainly from this point here, Haggai 2 verses 20 through 23. Oh, you got your 23 again. So, and the reason, this is the reason people are talking about it, because it says, and again the word of the Lord came unto Haggai in the 24th day of the month. Okay, and it says back in verse 9, I think. Sorry, in verse 10, that's where it specifies that this is talking about the 9th month, right? So it's like the day before Hanukkah, right? Or you could say that on the 24th day of the 9th month, Hanukkah begins at sunset, right? Because that's at sunset the 25th day of the month starts, and that's that's when they start Hanukkah, right? The 25th day of the 9th month. So this is kind of a reference to Hanukkah. And then he says, on that day I will overthrow the throne of kingdoms, I will destroy the strength of the kingdoms of the heathen, and I will overthrow the chariots and those that ride in them, and the horses and their riders shall come down, every one by the sword of his brother. And then it says in verse 23, in that day, saith the Lord of hosts, will I take thee, O Zerubbabel, my servant, the son of Shealtiel, saith the Lord, and will make thee as a signet, for I have chosen thee, saith the Lord of hosts. Okay. Oh, right, let's see. So, that's got the 2023 there, and then it's a direct reference to Hanukkah, because this is the time of Hanukkah, right? And it's talking about this shaking, right? Which we can sort of liken to the sudden destruction that occurs concurrent with the rapture or just after the rapture. And then in verse 23, it talks about, it says, I will take thee. Okay, so that's sounds like a rapture. And he's talking to Zerubbabel, and like we just said, Zerubbabel has a connection to the number 43 that we were talking about a moment ago. And the meaning of Zerubbabel is child of Babylon, or begotten in Babylon. So I think that we're all living in Babylon, more or less, from a spiritual standpoint. This pretty much all of the world is Babylon at this point. Some people say, I happen to think that Babylon, like, mainly, for the most part, is the United States. Some people think that it refers more narrowly to, New York City or something. And then some people broaden it out to think of it as, Western, like Western civilization, like Western Europe and Australia, Britain, USA. Nevertheless, we're all children of Babylon. So if you I looked in Wikipedia in the entry for Zerubbabel, and it says in all of the accounts in the Hebrew Bible that mention Zerubbabel, he is always associated with the high priest who returned with him, Joshua, son of Jozadak. Together, these two men led the first wave of Jewish returnees from exile and began to rebuild the temple. You know, let me just go ahead and pull that up real fast. Here we go. Yeah, so that's what I was just reading. So together these two men led the first wave of Jewish returnees from exile and began to rebuild the temple. So the symbolism here is fairly obvious. You've got Zerubbabel, in other words, the children of Babylon, being led by the high priest Joshua, aka Yeshua, into heaven as the first wave of souls into heaven, and then to rebuild the temple or build New Jerusalem. Yeah, so that's a pretty obvious rapture-y sort of scenario. The other thing is that, like I mentioned, Zerubbabel means, oops, I'll just do it on the next line. Means child of Babylon. But the word actually has has constituent parts, and those parts are Zerab and Babel. And Zerab means to scorch. Well, I'm just do it like this. This is getting a little weird. Zerab means to scorch or to burn, and Babel means Babylon. So you've got like this flip side where it's talking. This I encountered this a lot actually, and researching this stuff. You'll have this dichotomy or something, a flip side where you have like something, some sort of blessing being described, like the rapture, and then the judgment also is like. The mirror version of it is the judgment. So this is no different. You've got the Zerubbabel being this, in Haggai 2:23, you've got them talking about taking Zerubbabel, as a signet because he's chosen you. But then Zerubbabel also means, if you look at the constituent word parts, as Babylon burning. That's what it means, right? Babylon burning. So we can expect something like that. After the rapture, or around maybe at the same time. Maybe that's why we have to get snatched out, because the USA gets nuked. That's my guess. And you'll have Babylon burning. So that's Zerubbabel, who is also mentioned in Zechariah 4. So this is a vision that Zechariah is having about this golden lampstand. And we've also got here, a menorah, so that's sort of kind of reminds you of Hanukkah as well. And you have the normal lampstand, I guess, with 7 lamps, and then on either side, you've got 2 olive trees. Okay, so you've got on either side of this lampstand, you've got an olive tree. And he asked Angel like what they represent, and he eventually tells him that they are the 2 witnesses, right? I think, yeah. What do they represent? Yeah, these are the 2 anointed ones that stand by the Lord of the whole earth. Okay, and then if you look at, so I think Revelation 11:4 or around there, that confirms it because it describes the olive trees again. It's basically like a reference back to Zechariah. Describes those olive trees again and identifies them as the 2 witnesses. So, and we know the 2 witnesses are basically going to come down right after the rapture. And what's interesting about this is in Yeah, so that's Zechariah 4. Immediately after that, you have Zechariah 5, and that's the vision of the flying scroll. And this, I won't get into detail because it would take a while to describe, and I probably wouldn't describe it well. But there's a video, um, Zechariah fire. Well, if I could type that right. Yeah, there's a video that explains how Zechariah 5 is essentially describing nuclear weapons, right? So these flying scrolls are basically nuclear missiles. It's pretty compelling too, like the way it describes it. Uh, this is the video here. Yeah, I'm not going to play that right now, but I guess I'll put this link in the video description later or in the pinned comment. So yeah, it's interesting how Zerubbabel means Babylon burning, and really Zerubbabel is only mentioned. It's not mentioned. He's not mentioned that many times in Scripture, but the two places that he's mentioned the most are Zechariah 4 and Haggai 2. I think 4 times in each of those chapters. And it's interesting that his name means Babylon burning, and then he's associated with the rapture, which is, we know is going to be connected to some sort of sudden destruction, probably nuclear destruction. And then right after, where he's mentioned a lot in Zechariah 4 is Zechariah 5, where it's describing nuclear weapons. And you'll really just have to see this video to understand what I mean. So it basically goes and talks about how this flying roll here, because Zechariah in his vision, he's just understanding things in terms of what in terms of his own language and his own concepts. So he is using his language to describe what he's seeing, which are these modern inventions of nuclear weapons and missiles and stuff. And let's see here. Yeah, the length thereof is 20 cubits. I guess that would be about the length of a nuclear missile. This is the curse that goeth forth over the face of the whole earth, right? The curse of nuclear destruction. And when he's talking about, oh gosh, I haven't watched this video in a while, but it says that there was lifted up a talent of lead. So this is, you have to watch this video, but when it's talking about lead is just a heavy element, and nuclear explosions are based on doing fission or fusion on heavy radioactive elements like uranium or plutonium. So there is no word in Hebrew for uranium and plutonium, but they just use the word for the heaviest element that they could, that there was a Hebrew word for, which is lead. So there's a lifting up a talent of lead. So if you're lifting up with a missile like a talent of uranium, it's just going to say lead here because there's no word for uranium. So anyway, I don't want to get too much into this, but so that's the other connection. So we had the John 10, which is set at Hanukkah, and then we have the Haggai 2, which refers to the 24th day in the 9th month, right? And talking about I will take you, Zerubbabel, my servant. And one thing I wanted to mention was that word take. Okay, so that's interesting. That's I don't know how to pronounce that. Lakach. Oh, here we go. Lakach. Whatever. So it's Hebrew, or Strong's Hebrew 3947. Okay. And that's okay. So first of all, that's like 3 plus 9 plus 4 plus 7 equals 23. And if you watch some of my last videos, I talk about how the number 118 or its mirror 811 is the numerical rapture number. Like that's the number that sort of refers to the rapture. Because Genesis 1:18, where they're separating the light from the darkness, and that's what happens in the rapture. The light of the world gets separated from the darkness, from the children of darkness, or the people who are walking in darkness. And if you go back to Genesis 1:18, where they use that word light. It's actually not really the word for light, even though it's using the English word light in King James version. The word for light is used earlier, where he creates light. That's a different word. That's like Hebrew 2:16, Strong's Hebrew 2:16. But when it starts talking about creating these lights in the firmament, that's a different word. That really, I think the definition has luminaries, so it's like not light in and of itself, but like the objects that produce light. I guess you could say it's something like a star or a planet or the sun or the moon, or in the case of souls, like people who are showing light and giving light to the world, and people who are walking in the light of the Holy Spirit and giving light to the world. That's a luminary, right? So that's different from the word Strong's Hebrew H2:16, which is light in and of itself, right? Or light in the abstract. Anyway, so yeah, Genesis 1:1-8, right? You've got the dividing the light from the darkness. Okay, that's a prophecy, in my opinion, of the rapture, and that's why I connect the number 118 or 811 to the rapture. So if you look at the number, or if you look at verse 16, it mentions these luminaries, and the Strong's number for that is 3974. And I saw that and I thought, that looks just like that Strong's Hebrew 3947, which was in Haggai 2:23, which represents to take, right? So you've got 3974 is light, which obviously also adds up to 23. So yeah, it's like when God is gonna when the rapture happens, that's God taking the light out of the world. So he's like 3947ing the 3974 out of the world, and that's just a kind of cool numerical coincidence there. That's not really a coincidence. And this word light here, I think it's it's this one right here. That's actually the 345th word of the Bible. Okay, and if you go to Pi Search and you look up 153, which represents the John 21:11, the catch of large fish, representing the catch of souls at the end of the age. It starts at position 344, but like the center number of the 153 is at position 345. And I don't think that's an accident, because there's a lot of connections with between the number 345 and the rapture. So, for instance, like the 345th verse from the end of the Bible is Revelation 3:10. Which is, because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world to try them that dwell upon the earth. Okay, so that's obviously referring to the rapture. Okay, so there's the 345th verse from the end of the Bible. Okay, and then the 345th verse of the book of Daniel is Daniel 12:1. I don't know why I'm using this. I can just go to this right here, to eSword. Daniel 12:1. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. And then many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. Blah blah blah. So that's another rapture verse there, and that's the 345th verse of Daniel. Okay, so we've got another connection there. Not only in pi is the number 153. That's the first occurrence of that number, by the way, in the digits of pi. Right there, straddling the 345th position, you've got the 345th verse from the end of the Bible is Revelation 3:10. 345th verse Daniel is referring to Daniel 12:1. And then numerically, let's see what else. Oh yeah, and then the getting back to Genesis there, the 345th word of the Bible is light, right? Referring to that Strong's Hebrew 3974. And let's see here. Numerically, what's interesting about 345 is I'm trying to figure out how to get all this information out in a way that flows naturally, but there's just so much random stuff. So the thing is, the word rapture in English, in the simple ordinal Gematria, is 99. Okay, so if you take 444, which is sort of like the door, right? We just do 444 minus 99. You get the 345, right? So 444 minus 99. It's another thing. It's not really an accident. Everything's all these numbers are connected to each other. Let's see what else about 345. So if you do so the number 153, if you like the smallest integers that you can divide to get that something really close to 153 is if you do 23, I'll do it over here. 23 divided by 15, you get the 1.5333333, right? So that's like 23 divided by 15. 53. Okay. Now, and then if you do 23 times 15, you multiply instead of divide it, you get 345. Isn't that interesting? Another interesting thing about 345 is that if you add 345 to its mirror image, right? So 345 plus 543 equals 888, which is represents Jesus. So 345 plus 543 equals Jesus. Oh, didn't type that right. 543. So those numbers are just 543 is just a mirror image of 345. So we've got all these connections with this number 345, and then I noticed that if you look up the Gematria for dedication, right? Because we're talking about the Feast of Dedication. You've got standard Gematria 345. I usually only use, by the way, when I do Gematria and I'm looking up Bible stuff, I only use ordinal, standard, and sometimes reduced, but really mostly just ordinal and standard, because I think those are mainly what God uses when he does Gematria. So yeah, so isn't that interesting that if you look up the word for dedication, right? And remember, Hanukkah means dedication. That's what the word means in Hebrew. The standard Gematria is 345. Which is related to the 153 fish, which is related to rapture, which is also related to not the 153, not just in basic math, but in pi. It's 153 is at position 345. It's you've got the biblical references of the 345th verse of Daniel and the 345th verse from the end of the Bible. Both point to rapture scenarios. You've got the 345th word of the Bible being light, which is to be taken out, I guess, because the 3974 is related to the 3947, which is to take. It's just so much stuff here. It's just amazing to me. All right, so the last thing I wanted to show with the 345 is this graphic that I created, and I explained this I guess it was like 2 or 3 videos back. But I was looking for the number 4345 in pi because, according to my chronology, 2023 is the 4,345th year since Noah's flood. And so, being a significant number on that basis, I went into Pi looking around, and I found this really amazing sequence of numbers that gives Jubilee information and Methuselah information. But if you're interested in that, you can go and watch that video. But that gives me another 345 number, right? So 2023, this year is exactly 4,345 years since the flood, according to my chronology. So we've got, there you go. And the 4 is kind of like for the door, and then the 345 represents the rapture, or has some sort of rapture meaning connection. Let's see. Oh yeah, there was one more thing I wanted to mention that pertains to Zerubbabel, which I should have mentioned earlier, but I forgot. But his Strong's number is 2216. And as soon as I saw that, having a mathematical mind, I just immediately I see this 118, because if you look at the divide in these two constituent parts, the 22 divided by 2 is 11, and the 16 divided by 2 is 8. So it looks almost like a little encoded 118. And as we've discovered in this video and revealed, that Zerubbabel seems to have a lot of this rapture meaning associated with that name and that character. It's no surprise to me. I think it's definitely intentional that God encoded a 118 into his Strong's number. So yeah. And speaking of 118, the next thing I wanted to look at was Genesis 18. So how is Genesis 18 a 118? Well, Genesis is the first book of the Bible, and you got the 18th chapter. So you got the first book, 18th chapter, 118. So what's happening in chapter 18? So in chapter 18, Sarah finally conceives Isaac, who is the child of the promise. And we as Christians are, by faith, also the children of the promise, as it says in, I think, the book of Romans, if I recall correctly. And in addition to that, there's the connection to Hanukkah, which is called the Festival of Lights. And, as we mentioned, that has to do, that has something to do with conception, right? Because Jesus Christ was conceived on Hanukkah, and he was the light entering the world. And there's also the light that flashes at a human conception under the microscope. So, I was just thinking, wouldn't that be interesting if the rapture happens at the Festival of Lights? Because if it like looks like a bunch of lights ascending into the sky, wouldn't that be an apt name for it, right? If that happens, a bunch of lights ascending into the atmosphere happens on the Festival of Lights. Yeah, it could be if that happens, and then that's interesting how that was named the Festival of Lights prior to the event. But of course, no surprise, because God knows all things in advance. Yeah, so here in book 1, chapter 18, 118, which is also a numerical connection to the rapture, we've got this conception going on, which connects to Hanukkah. And this is happening when Abraham is 99 years old. And as we saw before, rapture in simple Gematria is, simple ordinal Gematria is 99. So yeah, there's a lot of connections here. And the very next chapter is, book 1, chapter 19, which is 119, and that's like a 911, right? And that's when Sodom and Gomorrah get destroyed. God destroys Sodom and Gomorrah, and they're looking at it, and it looks like the smoke of a furnace. And yeah, so the reason 911 has its connotation is that 9 means judgment, and 11 means chaos or disorder. So whenever you see 911 or 119 in the Bible, it has that connotation of sort of chaos, destructive, judgment. And when you see when you see 19, it's a related meaning, but it means sort of like final judgment or a perfect judgment, because 10 means ordinal perfection, and 9 means finality or judgment. So when you've got the 19, right, which is the 10 plus the 9, it usually means like a perfect judgment, okay? Or a righteous judgment, you can say. And we know that Eve and Job, their Hebrew Gematria values are equal to 19, right? And in the case of Eve, that righteous judgment on Eve, that's what it's referring to, because Eve was the one who sinned, was the first sin. So the judgment on humanity, the righteous judgment on humanity, came from her. That's why there's the connection between Eve and 19. And then Job, he was complaining because he was suffering under the judgment, and then God was sort of arguing that his judgment is righteous, and Job just didn't, he wasn't able to to understand why what he was going through was in fact the righteous judgment of God. So that's why the 19 is connected to Job as well. So, yeah, a little bit of trivia there. All right, so let's see here. I think I can mention a couple more things here while I'm on the topic. So if you look at 2023, for instance, right, and you just do some simple arithmetic. So you say 2023, minus 19, okay? So 23 minus 19. So what this is sort of meaning here is like 2023 without judgment, or if you escape the judgment, is 4, because 23 minus 19 equals 4, which means door, right? That's the escape. You can look at it in a different way. You can say 23 is equal to 19 plus 4, which is to say that 2023 brings judgment and an escape. Or you could say, instead of minusing the judgment, you could add the judgment, and 23 plus 19 equals 42. You get the Antichrist. 42 months of the Antichrist instead of the door. So if you 2023 minus the 19 minus the judgment, you get the 4, which is the door. You add the judgment, you get the Antichrist. And if you look at you can also apply this to the patriarchs. So these are the patriarchs, and these are their lifespans, and then you've got the flood date right here. So Methuselah, he lived 969 years, and he died the year of the flood. This year is wrong. In my chronology, I've got it as 1657, but that's not really important right now. So if you take, and so then Noah lived 950 years, and he went through the flood, right? So he survived. So if you take 969, and that's Methuselah's age, and that, what we're looking at here is that sort of represents a person who's dying at the flood date, right? But if you take away that judgment, right? So if you do 969 minus 19, you get 950. So if you take away the judgment of the flood, right, you get 950. You get somebody who lives through the flood. So this is just how arithmetically a lot of this stuff works. And there's more fun things that you can find all the time. Like if you take 2023 and you add Jesus, add Jesus to it, Let's look at the calculator here. 2023 plus 88. You get 2111, which is John 21:11, which is the verse where he talks about the 153 fish. Catch a fish at the end of the age. That's pretty compelling by itself. Don't even need the rest of the video. So yeah, that's what that's all about. That 119, 911. So in the first book and 19th chapter, you've got the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and that's happening right after the 118, right? The first book of the 18th chapter, where you've got this conception that's seems to be having a lot of connections to Hanukkah, right? Or being connected, being indicative of the rapture, I guess you'll say. So right after that, you've got this 119, and you've got the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, which seems to symbolize the sudden destruction that happens right after the rapture. And just like we saw earlier with the Zerubbabel constituent parts of that word, meaning Babylon burning, and then Zechariah 5, which talks about nukes, coming right after Zechariah 4, where it's talking about Zerubbabel and the menorah. It's really the patterns are looking very strong now. It's a very compelling pattern that we've got here. All right, so what can I talk about next? I guess I can talk about some numbers, some random number stuff. Let's see. I shared this with Aaron over at God a Minute, and he did a video on it. But I discovered that Methuselah is the Hebrew name for Methuselah. The Hebrew or the Gematria value is 784, and when I saw that, my eyes perked up, because that's the same year that we're in right now. That's the Jewish year, 5784. Now, and I know that they have the wrong year. It's like 210 odd years off from the true year since creation. But God knows. He's outside of space and time. He knew exactly how many years their calendar was going to be off. So he uses their numbers too, right? Their year number 2 for encoding information. And we know that Methuselah's name means his death shall bring, because his death was a prophecy of the flood of the first judgment, right? So when he would die, then the judgment would come. And we know that how that panned out. The same year he died, the flood began. Excuse me. So anyway, what was I going to say about this? Okay, so yeah, we've got the 784. Let's get rid of this stuff here. All right. That's Methuselah's name in Hebrew Gematria. And then you've got the 5 hidden in the years between when Lamech, his son, died, and the beginning of the flood. So you can see that 1656 to 1651. Yeah, 1656. By the way, like I said earlier, that's not the correct. This chart doesn't really have the correct year, at least according to my reckoning, because my chronology has 1657 as the year the flood started, which is interesting because, if I remember correctly, 1 plus 6 plus 5 plus 7 equals 19. So yeah, and we know that equals perfect or final judgment. So isn't that interesting that happens in the year the flood starts? But anyway, using these years that are on this chart just for simplicity's sake, 1656 minus 1651 is 5. So that's where that's where you get the 5. And then the name of Methuselah in Hebrew Gematria is a 784. And then that's hinting strongly that our current year, which is 5784, is the year that the judgment begins, the end times, tribulation, all that jazz. So, the other thing, what did I want to say about this? Yeah, So if you look at 5784 in Strong's, actually not 5784, but just the 784, right? So Hebrew 784 means fire, or God's anger. Okay, and then like I said, there's always this kind of flip side thing. It happens a lot actually in Strong's numbers, where you'll have the flip side manifesting, via the Hebrew versus the Greek. So the good side will be Hebrew, and the judgment or the nasty side will be Greek, or vice versa. So in this case, it's the same. So Greek 784 means spotless and unsullied, which is what happens to the bride when we get translated. We're now spotless and unsullied, wearing our white robes, perfectly righteous, having God's righteousness on us in the kingdom of heaven. So that's very, very interesting. I think somebody else pointed out that the Hebrew 5784, because there's only Hebrew, there is no Greek 5784, because there are fewer words. It actually means chaff. So I think he was saying that recalls maybe like the wheat being taken up and the chaff burned. Maybe, I don't know. So yeah, it's chaff. What else about 5784? Okay, so I mentioned that in my estimation, 118 equals rapture, right? Rapture, resurrection, event. So it's actually interesting arithmetically. If you take 784, it's equal to 666 plus 118. So it sort of numerically represents the two paths that a soul can take at this juncture of 784, which I think means 5784. You can either go 666, you can go to the kingdom of the beast and the Antichrist and all that stuff, or you can go 118, rapture, resurrection, event. And if we keep on playing with numbers, we take the 5784, we do 57 plus 84. 57 plus 84, you get 141. 141 kind of looks like a door. You've got the side of the door here and the side of the door here. You've got the 4, which represents the door, Jesus Christ, right in the middle. You go through that door. I noticed also in Psalms, I looked up Psalms 141. Here we go. Yeah, it's got some rapture language. Let's see. You got your lifting up. You got the door here. Keeping me from the snares which they have laid for me, because that's like in I think the book of Luke, it talks about escaping from the snare. Let the wicked fall into their own nets, whilst that I escape, right? That I escape from them. So Psalm 141 is talking about the rapture a lot, so maybe that's another encoded, it's like a number encoding representing rapture. So yeah, 57 plus 84 equals 141, and if you take rapture, my rapture number, and you add 23, 118 plus 23 for 2023, you get, what do you get? 141. Very interesting. If you take the 141st prime number, if you want to find that out, just go over to Gematria website. Right here. And type in 141, get the properties. Find the prime. The 141st prime is, well, what do you know? 811. Not a coincidence. That's 118 backwards. Pointing to the rapture again. And if we want to look in pi, I want to look at the 141st digit of pi. I wrote a program to do that. Let me see here. Project run. Looking at the 141st digit of pi, okay? And then this program gives me that output of that. So the 141st digit of pi starts with this 5 here. So we got 5359. Okay, so let's punch that in to Strong's. Okay, so Strong's Greek 5359 is Philadelphia. So that's the church of brotherly love. That's the church that gets the escape. I believe it's in Revelation 3:11 or 3:10. And then Strong's Hebrew 5359 is vengeance. So yeah, this is what I'm talking about. You always have this kind of flip side thing going on where you get the the Hebrew or the Greek version has the blessing and the other side has the curse. So this is no exception. So yeah, wow, this is amazing. You've got 140 40th digit of pi has a number which is 53,359. And that means Philadelphia, if I can type, or vengeance. Amazing. So yeah, this 141 has a lot of rapture connection as well, and it looks like a rapture, looks like a door. And the 141st prime is 811. That reminds me of Strong's Hebrew 811. Yeah, that means cluster. Okay, and if you've seen some of my old videos, or my last, I don't know, maybe like 3 or 4 videos, I talk about how cluster is sort of like a typological reference to raptured souls, because we're like this cluster that gets cut off in, I think, Numbers chapter 13, that gets cut off, or the Hebrew word is karath, which is another Hebrew word that is a typological reference to the rapture. So we're getting this this cluster refers to that which is taken, right? Anyway, so that is Strong's Hebrew 811. Oh yeah, it's right here. Numbers 13:23, right? 23. What a shock, right? So that cluster of grapes is, I'll just show it to you. Cut down, yeah. 3772, Karath, by Joshua and Caleb, right? And that's a typological symbol of the church being raptured, or the bride being raptured. Yeah, Karath. Anyway, so back up. That's Numbers 13:23, because it happens in 2023. And we've got, where was I going with this? Okay, so that's Strong's Hebrew 811, and this is the word here. in Hebrew. So let's check the Gematria for that. Oh, not there. So this cluster word has a Hebrew Gematria of 357. And if we use the Enochian key of 23, which is where you use this 23 as a key to unlock secrets, you can take that, what was it again? 357. 357 divided by 23. What do you get? 15.52. Well, that looks familiar, doesn't it? Let's see here. 1 Corinthians 15:52. Let me get the... Yeah, 1 Corinthians 15:52. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. Yep, so that's what the Hebrew of the word cluster is hiding, which is Strong's Hebrew 811, which is the rapture number. Let's see, that word karath also reminds me of something. So yeah, the cluster gets karathed. Right here, 3772, okay? Karath. And let's see, it's got yeah, 289 occurrences in the Bible. So if you take 289 times 7, you get 2023, which is amazing. And I think also if you look at the 289th, if I want to look at the 289th digit of pi, I gotta run my program again here. 289. Yeah, look at that. Right in the middle of the first occurrence in pi of the digit 726. 726 harpazo. The 289th position of pi, or digit of pi, however you want to say it, lands right smack dab in the middle of 726, which is the first time that 726 appears in pi. So that another insane connection between 289 and the rapture, which is, and 289 is the number of occurrences of this word karath. And let's see what else. Oh, you know what? I just remembered that this cluster, which was, they had the Hebrew value of 357. There are actually 357 verses in the book of Daniel. So, wow, yeah, and that's, that's like the revelation of the Old Testament. So that's another amazing connection with this this word cluster. What else can we find? Let's see, what if we take that, we showed earlier that rapture is 99, right? Rapture equals 99. Simple ordinal English Gematria. Now, if we take, let's add Jesus to that. Let's see, 99 plus 88. Oh, we get 187. So 99 plus 88 equals 187. And 187 is famous because that is the age that Methuselah was when he had his first child, Lamech. And it also symbolizes the Antichrist, because if I recall correctly, 11 times 17 is equal to 187. 187, 11 times 17. And Zechariah, I believe. Yeah, Zechariah 11:17 is woe to the idle shepherd that leaveth the flock, the sword shall be upon his arm and upon his right eye, his arm shall be clean, dried up, and his right eye shall be utterly darkened. That's a reference to the Antichrist. So 187 is a numerical reference to basically to this this head wound that the Antichrist receives, right? And that's because it's 11 times 17. Something just occurred to me as well. So if you take 223, right, which I often use for 2023 because in numerics, almost all the time you can drop zeros. You can basically oftentimes drop zeros or repeating digits. Not all the time with repeating digits, but sometimes. So if you take that and let's see, subtract 70 from that, right? Nice God number. 223 minus 70. Whoa, that's 153, catch a fish. Alternatively, you could just say 153 plus 70 equals 2023 AD. Well, anyway, I could just keep on playing with numbers all night, but I guess I'll just end the video at this point. Yeah, Hanukkah looks pretty exciting to me. It looks like there's a lot of fascinating connections at a lot of different levels, from a lot of different aspects. You've got numerical connections, you've got typological connections, you've got language connections, you've got just the fact that Hanukkah comes from the same word that Enoch comes from, and Enoch was the first person raptured. And yeah, it looks, we found some cool stuff when we were looking at Haggai chapter 2 and John chapter 10 and Revelation chapter 18, a lot of stuff related to, conception. It looks really good. So, but, we don't know. It's all going to be in the Lord's timing. But I do feel that rapture must happen in 2023. Otherwise, I'm going to be really confused because there's just a lot of prophetic and numerical stuff pointing to 2023. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys stuck it out to the end. And if you did, thank you very much. Definitely leave me a comment if you guys have any cool, interesting associations. I love reading comments with, interesting information, stuff that I didn't think of. That's one of the funnest things about reading comments is, wow, that's something I didn't think of. And at any rate, if you like the video, drop me a like. And thanks so much for watching.